You know, one of the questions my students always ask me is why don't the Vikings get credit for discovering America? Of course, the whole idea that anybody discovered it is kind of silly. It was already here. You can't discover something that's already here. But they'll ask, isn't it true that the Vikings were here 500 years before Columbus? The answer is yes. There's no question about it. In fact, recent DNA studies have shown that they even brought an Indian woman with them back to Iceland. And with them around 1000 AD, and she has descendants living in Iceland today. So there's no question that they set foot in North America. They had been moving west through Iceland into Greenland, and eventually landed in what is now the province of Newfoundland in Canada. They called the place Vinland, and they called the natives they met Skraelings. So why does Columbus get the big whoop out of this? Well, the answer is disease. It seems that when the Vikings arrived in Vinland, they were germ-free, pretty much. They did not carry smallpox and measles with them like the Spanish did 500 years later into Mesoamerica and into the highlands of Peru. Instead, they had been in Iceland, they'd been in Greenland. The populations were small enough that these diseases, even though they existed in Europe, didn't have a large enough population to succeed. And so they'd burned themselves out. And so when the Vikings arrived in Newfoundland, they didn't have the assistance of diseases to attack the Skraelings. Well, they set up a colony there, lasted 3 years. The natives weren't very friendly. They packed up and went back to Greenland. Now, there's no question they visited Vinland again 2 or 3 times, but they couldn't gain a foothold because they had no way of weakening these Indians like the Spanish had 500 years later after Columbus. Now, the interesting part of this story is then, when they got back to Greenland and their base in Greenland, then bubonic plague swept across Europe. And half of Scandinavia, Iceland, died. And the plague arrived in Greenland. Just a few years later, seafarers visiting Greenland found nothing but deserted and isolated, empty villages. The plague had wiped them out. So not only did disease prevent the Vikings from establishing a foothold in America, as the Spanish easily did later with the help of disease, but they also were unable to capitalize on their discovery because they were so quickly weakened by the Black Death, by the plague sweeping across Europe. Also, cooling helped to diminish the ability of them to survive on Greenland. So here we have a case where disease both impeded a conquest and an exploration, and then turned right around and prevented the conquerors, would-be conquerors, from capitalizing on their discovery.